Per usual, everything on this channel is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as financial advice. It is Teaching Tech Tuesday. Let's talk about some all-time high checklist criteria, what to look for when we are in price discovery, what to look for when we think there might be a market top. People have said, historically, it's hard to pick out a top. It's hard to know when we are there. It's hard to know when euphoria has peaked. While I will agree, there are still things to watch and things to look for. Now, I've made similar videos like this in the previous halving. This was over 3 years ago, a series of videos for Brave New Coin. Put those vids in a playlist that I'll link in the description of this video should you want to go back and look at the quote-unquote price calls for all-time high at that time, because I will be using similar logic for this current batch of all-time high predictions. The good news is, on the technical side, you can apply the technicals to Bitcoin, alts, legacy, doesn't matter. That's certainly why I prefer technicals over everything. They're always applicable. They're never not applicable. On the fundamental side, it gets a little more specific, but also broader stuff like insider or whale selling, public participation, product listings, other newsy things to watch for. I've also written about this, and I've done some Twitter threads on this. And again, I'll put all the links in the description of this video. If you like what I'm talking about, give me a like or a subscribe, whatever you want to do, or a comment. I'll take it all. Lots of charts, but really it's simple because this list doesn't change. It's the same from cycle to cycle. Really nailed this down before the last cycle. After 2017, 2018, I began to realize the cloud is great at keeping you in a trend. The cloud is not necessarily great at predicting where the trend could go. So both are useful, both have their use case. I think it's important to have some idea broadly so that you're not selling when things look overheated, even though in the broader cycle sense, we could still make a 10x from here or a 5x from here, just based on math, right? Based on looking at the left side of the chart to try to predict, dangerous word, the right side of the chart. Fib extensions, you see me use all the time, Fibonacci extensions. We take the all-time high, we take the bear market low, and it gives us a 1618 and a measured move essentially for any coin, any stock, any whatever. That will give you some broad sense of where this could go. Can we go higher? Yes. Can we fail to meet those levels? Of course, but it gives you some baseline point on the vision board, the dream board. Yes, six figures are very possible this run. Not only that, but the yearly pivots also currently point to six figures. That doesn't mean that will be this year. 2024, 2025 is in the wheelhouse. Post Bitcoin halving, X days after halving is typically when we see new all-time highs. Have we pulled the entire cycle forward because of this ETF stuff? Perhaps, but we'll see. In previous price discovery territory modes, we've exceeded the R5 yearly pivot. So that's also something to consider for Bitcoin, right? Am I going to sell everything up here? Do I have asks already set up here? Of course not. But this does say, hey, we still have a 2x from here at current prices for sort of the bare bones case for price discovery. Okay, so I will take that trade all day. And this applies to any coin, including ETH, including poor man's Solana right now, right? Yearly pivots to 5 and a 5.5K. I kind of like this meme target of 8888, which is the Chinese good luck number, 8. I know there's been some talk of 10K as well, but I wouldn't lose sight of the fact that, look, this is still a 4 or 5x from here higher if this thing does run, which it should. Doesn't mean it will. But if you're an ETH maxi, this is what you need to be looking at. Not like, oh, we've been underperforming the world. Boo-hoo. Woe is me. Who cares, right? If you're here for the long haul, if you're here on a higher time horizon, you're looking at those far out targets. Solana, yearly pivot, 400. R5, measured move would be 500. So you better believe if we get anywhere close to that level, I'm going to be screaming about those measured move targets because we are already fairly overheated on Solana. And I'll show that with some other charts, but those targets very much applicable. Something else I look at every day. I look at the power law corridor every day, and I look at the 2-year moving average multiplier every day. Green is the 2-year moving average. The red is the 5x multiple, and the white is basically the midpoint between those two levels. I just want to see, are we overbought? Are we oversold? In 2 seconds or less, the time it takes your eye to register the image to your brain. Milliseconds, okay? That's how long it should take you to figure out if we're overbought or oversold. So if you really wanted to, you could put all this stuff in a giant spreadsheet and say, assign it some values between 0 and 10, and then calculate some risk metric and go from there. But we have plenty of upside left. Historically, it's there. I'm backtesting, it's there. Forward testing, it's there. 6 figures, easy for BTC. ETH points closer to 10K. Now for alts on this specific multiplier, which is available on TradingView, I bump it down a time frame or multiple time frames. So in ETH's case, this is actually the 1-year moving average multiplier, which really is just as good. Ultimately, you want to see extensions above the multiple, but realistically, that's close enough, right? It tells you pretty specifically here that that second high, you're in trouble because you're not only you're under the bid line, but you didn't make a new high, right, on the multiplier. So again, plenty of upside here on ETH. For Link, I also like the 12-hour. You can see how he made basically successive lower highs on each high. So you have to know what you're looking at. Historically, you have to know, like, oh, this is where we start to get into trouble. Do you want to sell here? 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 It depends on what it is. You have to know what you're looking at. So right now we're talking 40s, 50s for upside. So again, plenty of room. If this is a true cycle, a true super cycle, plenty of room. Solana, as you can see, a bit different from the others. Now it is bumped down quite a bit on time frames, but historically it doesn't really extend much past the whatever the 8-hour multiple of the 730. I don't know the math on that, but it doesn't extend past the multiple historically. The multiple will keep moving up. It will likely keep finding support, but it does give you a rough sense of risk reward relative to everything else. Can this be wrong? Can Solana outperform? Of course, but it does say to me that the top side is rather limited here for Sol in the moment. And you can also look at stuff like MSTR or Coin or whatever you want. This basically sniped the top on MSTR. No question there. Really sniped the bottom too with Adam and Eve. You can look at Tesla with this indicator. It's all the same. It's all great. Plenty of places down here on MSTR where it told you to buy. Currently the top side on MSTR is like 2,200. So plenty of upside targets still collectively across the board. And pick your favorite alt, pick some time frame. And yes, that is curve fitting. You do have to curve fit a little bit. Not everything has a decade's worth of trading history like Bitcoin. So that one's very useful and valuable. Play around with that one. The Pi Cycle top is another one pretty fairly well known here. This was back tested for the previous 3 all-time highs. So it's a specific set of moving averages and a moving average multiplier that has been able to identify a top in the market within 3 days of the cross. Last cycle, this was really one of the only indicators that gave you a heads up on the first all-time high. So we're not close here yet. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people screaming about this this go round. If it crosses, when it crosses, it's inevitable that it will cross. But we still have plenty of room here to run on the Pi Cycle top. For this specific indicator, I don't think it's applicable across the board. You'd have to backtest different indicators and multipliers for ETH as an example, but the concept is still very useful. This is the power law corridor or log regression. There's all sorts of variations of this. Again, much like the moving average multiplier. I look at this every day. I open it up. Okay, we're good, right? Just a millisecond sanity check. Plenty of upside. This one's even more generous with the 6-figure target at 283 currently. Some people have thought, well, we're going to have diminishing returns continuously on cycles. Everything's priced in, bro. The ETF's priced in, bro. The halvings are always priced in, bro. Halving's a meme, bro. Sure, it's priced into us because we're here. There are people who have no clue what this stuff is. There are people who have no clue that an ETF's coming. So EMH works when everybody knows all the information. But I'm here to tell you right now, not everybody knows all the information. Okay, they just don't. They don't care. They haven't cared. And many people will be learning about Bitcoin relative to everything else for the first time this cycle. They've heard of it, sure. They've seen the volatility, but they may not know and probably don't know what makes this thing tick, what makes this thing special. And as the halving approaches, people will be hearing about that more and more, hopefully getting curious, understanding what's going on, and then we'll start to make allocation decisions relative to that information. But not everybody knows that this is a thing. Okay, sorry, I hate to break it to you. You halving's priced in, bros. But not everybody knows what's going on here. Certainly. ETH also has a log regression. Again, it gives you a range, 7K. This is going to keep moving up on a weekly basis. There's a log curve zone indicator on TradingView for ETH that's fairly generous to like 20K, right? but it's a good idea to have some sort of price channel, long-term viewpoint. Where could this go? So that if you do a long-term time horizon, again, you're not selling at this level, because who cares? Who cares if this goes to 1500, 500? Honestly, who cares? Downside is 0, upside is 20K. Downside on Bitcoin is 0, upside is 300K, whatever it is, 250. So you don't want to sweat the small stuff on 100x leverage down here when nothing's going on for ETH, as an example. This is another version of the power law corridor, the long-term power law. I like this because it really scrunches the dates, but again, it gives you a range of what to expect, overbought, oversold, where to expect X price by X date based on the equation. This stuff's also available on TradingView, but it says we got plenty of room. This is even more generous with, let's check, April 2025 would be a year after halving. That's a 400K upside target. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's really about risk reward, relative value using historic price action, because that's all we have. This is TA, right? Then there's the much maligned pitchforks, which I think again are a super simple tool you can apply on any time frame, any chart, doesn't matter. Super valuable, highlighting what the channel is. That's all it is. It's like people freak out about pitchforks. It does help identify when we are overbought or oversold relative to the previous price action in the channel. So very clearly we are overbought relative to the current previous year's price action. We may reform another pitchfork, right? We may go into overdrive on the rate of change as we have in 2017. Honestly, I hope not, because it's a little early for that. But it's interesting over multiple years how we've oscillated in and around this pitchfork. There's kind of 0% chance that we ever go back to this, just because it's such an aggressive angle. But what I do find interesting is that we went above this, went below this, back inside, right, multiple times. So just because a channel is invalidated doesn't mean it still isn't applicable to the market in some way way down the line. We can look at ETH right now, same thing. Plenty of upside potential targets. Midpoint of the pitchfork, which is super important, currently sitting at, we'll call it 4 to 8K. It doesn't really matter what the future targets are. It really matters like where we are now relative to the midpoint. To me, this says higher. To me, this says ETH on the USD pair at least survived, probably moves higher. Solana has historically had a pitchfork, multi-month pitchfork that got invalidated. Currently, it's in a pretty aggressive pitchfork. Definitely worth watching for on the invalidation side as far as the end of a bull run. And I think we're unlikely to overshoot this pitchfork just because it's so aggressive. On the channel link, man, I can't tell you how many Marines were angry at me when I kept talking about this pitchfork and we were falling out of the pitchfork. And I said, look, the bull run's probably over. Sure enough, look at 2 years later, here we are. Out of the pitchfork, have been out of the pitchfork for a long time. So when we start to get angry, when we start to break the midpoint or break down below and invalidate those channels, it's usually a good sign that things are different. Things are much different than before. Then last on the TA, there is the moving average multiplier, or moving average multiple, I guess you could say. This is also an indicator on TradingView. What I'm looking at here is the price differential between the 20-week moving average. Throughout Bitcoin's history, the 20-week has acted as strong support in a bull trend, strong resistance in a bear trend, and it's acted as a price magnet. So using this, you can identify intra-cycle and end-of-cycle highs or lows. You can see historically what's been tolerated by the market as far as distance from this level. Anything above 100% from the 20-week moving average, we're probably getting close to the top, or that is the top. So this is going to change on a weekly basis, but it's important to just monitor this to get a gauge and a sense for how overbought we may be, as well as realistically where to place bids. If things get ugly, we're going to the 20-week. We always have. Now, it's like taken weeks and weeks, potentially, or in some cycles, it's just never gotten there. But if this is going to be a multi-year cycle, I'd expect multiple touches of the 20-week. ETH, same thing. No difference at all. And we're just getting started on ETH. So again, plenty of upside there. No worries. Solana looks a bit different. It is quite extended above the 20-week moving average, kind of in be careful up here territory, right? To me, this says along with the 2-year moving average multiplier, Solana probably underperforms based on expectations in the near term. That doesn't mean it can't keep going. It would actually serve Solana better and things that look like Solana if there was a massive pullback to the 20-week, because then it would allow new money to come in. It would flush out the late longers, and it would allow the trend to keep going. Similar to on the way down, resistance at the 20-week happened over and over and over again. So that's what you really want to see in a bull market. On Link, you can see we kind of topped out when we got maximally in the current bull trend above the 20-week. So I like that this is resetting. I like that this has slowed down, and to me gives Link a better chance relative to Solana to actually keep going. Just based on technicals. We can argue all we want about XYZ, layer 1 versus whatever else. Doesn't matter. I'm just looking at technicals here. So the 20-week is a great equalizer for that. Coin as well. Guess what? Coin's barely been trading, let's be honest, but the coin top currently is basically the all-time high from the 20-week. So this thing is running extremely hot. Doesn't say it can't keep going, but it is important because the further you are away from the averages, the higher the probability profit taking starts to overcome new money. So it makes sense to me, based on this alone, that coin has started to slow down. Mara, kind of the same thing. It wasn't an all-time high from the 20-week, but it was a multi-year high from the 20-week. So what you really want to see now is everything reset. Let the moving averages catch up. Give this some time. Ideally, we don't go berserk around the ETF stuff, and we kind of just drift sideways into halving and then begin the slow multi-month ascent across the board. Here's MSTR, again, multi-month high relative to distance from the 20-week moving average. For MSTR, anything with a SPAC on the legacy side that got listed, you just have to be careful when did MSTR start including Bitcoin in their treasury? That's when you would want to look at the data. That's probably self-explanatory, but worth mentioning. All right, let's talk about the fundamental side real quick, which to me is shorter, less valuable, harder to necessarily identify, but there are some specific things to look for. On the Bitcoin side, there's market cap relative to realized value, MVRV. This is coin metrics. There's Look into Bitcoin. There's Glassnode. There's lots of different places you can find this. Coin metrics is free. That's why I'm highlighting this one. But historically on MVRV, anything close to 4 as a multiplier has been a market top since 2013. MVRV is currently 2. That can go up and down independent of price, but one TLDR way to read this is unrealized profits. If the market cap is far above the realized on-chain value of coins, at some point probability kicks in that the coins are more likely to move, right? We've hit somebody's number, whether that's 75, 275, 575. Everybody has a number, and you see that show up on the multiplier. Relative to the pre-halving year, you can see in 2019, the MVRV hit 2.5, a little bit higher. In 2016, MVRV hit 2.16. So we are in the wheelhouse for MVRV to calm down a little bit relative to pre-halving year MVRV targets. And in some ways, unfortunately, if there's anything that's going to blow up past data, it's something like an ETF, because that's just completely new to the market. So this situation is very different in that respect. Hodl waves for Bitcoin is another one that's very important. If you're seeing a lot of old coins get moved, very similar to MVRV, if you're seeing a lot of hodl coins that are getting unhodled, and you're seeing a lot of on-chain activity as a percentage of the network from the newer coins, we can shut off these older levels just to illustrate kind of what I'm looking for. This 6 to 12 month hodl wave has been the most relevant, and you can see there's kind of this downsloping trend. You can look at realized hodl waves. You can adjust this a little bit with a Z-score. But when we start to see a lot of freshly moving coins, that's usually the top. People move coins because they're selling them. That's just how it's always been. You hodl in a bear market, you hodl to the depths of despair, and then you unlock those coins effectively when you hit your price targets on the upside. The good news is currently, hodl waves are still declining, right? We're not seeing profit-taking mentality based on on-chain behaviors. Now, if we go all the way down to maybe the 1 month to 3 month, we are starting to see highs here. So just something early to watch for. A different version of that for ETH would be the validator queue. What you don't want to see for ETH is unlocks anywhere. You don't want to see the validator queue get filled with exit people. You don't want to see active validators decline. I mean, Dash was the same way historically. When validators kind of topped out, that was historically the top of the market because that represents a supply soak. Another thing I don't like on ETH currently is that the staking rewards based on this website are continuing to fall. So that discourages staking behaviors, discourages supply soak. There's obviously a give and take here with the inflation schedule or the burn, but just something to watch for on the ETH side. Back to Bitcoin, the Puel multiple is another good one because it illustrates how in profit the miners are now versus the past year. So it's a year look back period. And again, you can see similar to MVRV, right? We're hitting these levels. So even if you don't trade BTC, it's important to have some read on where the market top for BTC is or will be based on these metrics. And then if we talk about, well, I guess fees too, specifically for Bitcoin miners, fees are super important to watch. Ordinals, whatever, they end up being NFTs, whatever it is, fees of whatever kind. You definitely want to be tracking that if you're trading the miners. And then there's the whale selling for Bitcoin. It's the 3 Gs, okay? It's GOX, GBTC, and government, US government. Those are the biggest whales outside of Sailor. GBTC being the biggest, the GBTC unlock being the biggest. That represents an increase in supply, potentially. Doesn't mean everything's going to be sold. Doesn't mean the government's going to market sell everything on the Coinbase. Okay, it's just, it represents an increase in supply temporarily that may prevent price from moving higher. This is the ETH Foundation. If we're talking about insider selling, at some point, at some price, it matters, okay? I don't have the updated version of this, but it's a great chart sort of illustrating where those sales have been. And this applies to any coin with a treasury. Even historically, when we're talking about ICOs, all of that ICO selling certainly helped keep the ETH price suppressed for many years. Whales feel great on the way up. Sailor feels great that he's buying Bitcoin. Tether, it's great that they're buying Bitcoin. But that day will come eventually where we will hit Sailor's price. We will hit Tether's price. Sailor says he doesn't have a price. Well, I'm guessing somebody on Sailor's team has a price. So it's definitely important to watch what those flows look like. Another one historically that's been relevant is Link. Again, the Marines hated me for this, pointing when the smart contract limited wallet was moving ETH. Historically, they did that on Binance. That was super easy to spot on chain. And you can see at some point, it starts to matter more and more as this notional price of the sales each month get extremely high. Because the Link wallets have been segregated, I haven't been able to update this. But something else to watch, of course, is the staking rewards. And I don't care what anybody says on any team. It's never about what they say. It's always about what they do and what is moving in the wallets. That's all that matters. I talked about this cycle stuff in the last video, but once we start to see public participation, media attention, greed, delusion, new paradigm, that type of language, also something to watch for in the media. This was, of course, the famous January 2018 article. Everyone's getting hilariously rich and you are not. I actually have this sweater, believe it or not. But the media is usually late on the pickup as far as what's going on the price side of things. So by the time it hits the media, it's usually the top or the bottom of price, right? We even currently have articles like this, which are actually kind of veiled as a negative article. If you read this article, it's actually super positive. But I'm still seeing articles like this, words like worry or caution, be careful. Be careful about these Bitcoin products. They might just destroy you is basically the essence of this article. So we still haven't reached the hearts and minds broadly on the legacy side to suggest that you need to fire your advisor if you're not exposed to this product, right? When we start to see headlines like that, then we know that's probably some sort of top based on the media attention. Something else to watch for is headlines relative to volume or exchanges bragging about volume or seeing some crazy multiplier in revenue. These aren't the real numbers yet. This is a Q4 estimate from some super sleuth on Twitter, basically saying that Q4 for Coinbase is going to blow Q3 out of the water and nobody's quite ready for that. But it's definitely something people are watching, the smart people are watching, and the flows for these ETF products are going to be very important as well. While we're on the topic of ETFs, if we dial back the time machine for Bitcoin and we look at the launches of products, historically that has been an interim top or bottom at the very least, which is why many people are calling this a buy the rumor, sell the news setup. And I think it's fair to say the consensus view is sell the news, which by its nature should be the wrong answer. It should be incorrect because it is the consensus view. I think over time it will definitely be incorrect. I think there's going to be a lag between the approval and the launch, as Alex says here. Sell the news has been on the launch, not on the approval. So we may have a week or two where we just continue on. We just continue going to 48, 52, whatever it is on the Bitcoin side. And then when the launch occurs, then we start to see price start to pull back. So some upcoming stuff to watch for would be Circle IPO. They've talked about this for years. I don't think a Binance.com or Binance US IPO is ever going to happen, but that's also something they've talked about for years. I would definitely watch for that. Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Binance is in way too much hot water territory to actually go public. If anything, I expect Binance US to shut down, and maybe that is another news headline to watch for wherever we at in the cycle. Maybe that ends up being bullish. And then the last launch to watch for would be a Kraken IPO. I have no inside information here, but this is another one a lot of people have been talking about for years. And then there's also some exotic products on the legacy side that are kind of slowly being talked about, but haven't been launched yet. Baskets of products also to watch for on the headline side of things. Where are we in the cycle price-wise relative to those launches? So between technicals and fundamentals, there is roughly always a spot at which, we just launched a 4x QQQ, right? Or a 4x 4x NASDAQ, right? ETF. Is that the top? Is that the local top on NASDAQ here? Might be. Usually these are, in the ideation process, and then eventually they get approved and listed. And by the time all that happens, the reasons for launching the product are kind of over, right? If we look at similar to the futures launches, futures ETFs, the short Bitcoin ETF launch, most of that move is already done by the time that thing launched. So it'll be interesting to see which products we get in this cycle. That's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.